We can now place our single and multiple choice nodes in the graph. Great! But let's be honest, it's gotta be one of the ugliest things you've ever seen. I mean, just look at that. Thankfully, we can make it at least slightly better using style sheets. I'll be showing the final result in the screen right now. So let's start by creating our node style sheet. To do that, we'll go into our Editor Default Resources Dialog System folder and right-click in the project window, go to Create, UI Toolkit and choose Style Sheet. I'll name mine DS Node Styles. Let's use this moment to add it to our GraphView script right away beneath our GraphView styles. When that's done, we can go to our DS_node_styles USS file and start updating our styles. We'll be creating our own classes, so I'll talk about how I'll go about naming them. You can of course follow whatever you'd like and name them whatever you want. I'll be following the way Unity does it a little bit, but not perfectly. I'll start with DS, which is short for Dialog System. And then I'll add in a scope, such as Node or GraphView. This is where these styles will be applied, likely to be specified in the name of the file. Right after that, I'll be specifying the context like text field or button, which tells us what elements are going to use this class. And then I'll specify the state of the element, such as hidden or selected. The double underscore is because Unity follows the BAM methodology. As we are only going to add these classes to their elements at the end, I'll be showing on the screen the differences whenever we add a new style. Remember that to many styles you just try things out and leave whatever you think looks best. And because this is a tutorial for an already made dialog system, I'll have my color codes and so on ready. Let's start by updating our extension container. We are simply going to update its background color and give it some padding so that the things inside are not touching the borders and have a nice spacing. So let's name our class DS_node extension container. Let's set the background color to be of the Xcode 1D, 1D, 1E. This will make it a dark gray. Then we'll set its padding to 8 pixels. Next, we'll be setting our custom data container class. We'll set its background color, its border radius and give it a padding as well. I'll name it DS_node custom data container. For the background color, I'll give it an Xcode of 21, 23 and 25, which is a lighter gray than the previous one. For our border radius, I'll give it a value of 4 pixels. This basically means the corners will be round instead of sharp. And for the padding, I'll give it a padding of 8 pixels. After that, we'll be updating our text fields. However, we'll actually update their input class and not the text fields themselves, as we want to update how the box looks like. Although, even though we are going to update an Unity built-in class, I'll make it so only those inside our custom node related classes are updated. Therefore, I'll name our class DS_node textfield. But make sure we are actually updating the input by saying greater than Unity textfield input. I'll leave a link down below if you want to know more about the greater than symbol, but it mostly means the input that's directly inside the element with our custom class. We'll be updating our background color, border radius, max and mid width, and padding. I'll give the background color the same Xcode as our extension container. And our border color an Xcode of 27, 29, 2C, which is a lighter gray. The border radius will be of 4 pixels. And to make sure the text fields don't grow too big for having a lot of text, we are going to make it have a max width of 240 pixels. For the same reason, but for becoming too small, we are going to give it a min width of 160 pixels. For our padding, I'll give it a value of 8 pixels. The styles we have defined here are fine for the base of our text fields, but we'll create an extra class for each text field so that they fit more where they are and to what they are. We'll first create a text field with the hidden state. This will make the text field look like labels when they are not being edited. We'll be using it both in our dialog name text field and in our choice text fields. So let's start by naming it dsNode, text field, and hidden. And also make sure it's for the Unity text field input. What we are going to do is very simply make both the background color and the border color transparent, and then revert their colors when we are focusing on the text field. So type in background color and pass in transparent, and then type in border color and pass in transparent as well. Now for when we are focusing on the text field, we use the same class but put in the focus pseudo class and revert both colors to the colors of the base text field above. Next, we'll do a slight update in our file name text field. I'll name it dsNode filename text field, and of course update the Unity text field input. And here we'll simply update its max width to be of 1000 pixels. We'll also be updating it in its focus to add a margin of 4 pixels together with a padding of 4 pixels as well. The margin makes it so the text field won't be touching the node borders, and the padding makes it so you can see more of the text while focusing. We are left with a slight problem however, and that's because the text field comes with a default left margin, making our text field not be correctly placed. So let's type in text field for our C# type selector and set its left margin to be 0 pixels. We'll now update our choices text field, so I'll create one named dsNode choice text field, and of course for the input again. We'll be updating the font size, the height, and the max and min width here, so for our font size I'll give it a value of 11 pixels. This will make the text slightly smaller. For the height I'll pop it up to 35 pixels, and the reason why is that if it was less than that, letters like Y will be cut off. For the max width I'll go with 1000 pixels as well here, and for our min width I'll go with 0. We'll also be updating its styles when focusing, as of right now when we focus on it, the height will be too big, as it doesn't look like a label anymore but like a text field instead. So I'll tone it down to be 25 pixels instead. Because of that, I'll add a margin of 4 pixels and a padding of 4 pixels as well. This will do the same as our file name text field. The last text field we'll be updating will be the dialog text one, which will be a bit different as it looks more like a quote box. We'll be updating it on normal input, on over, and when focusing. So I'll create a class named dsNode quote text field and place the other two states now as well. In the normal input, we'll be updating its background color to have the X code of 23, 25, 27. This code makes it a lighter gray than the custom data container one. We'll be updating its border color to be transparent so that it has no border whatsoever. However, we want a border to its left side to make it seem like a quote, so I'll give it the border left color and set it to 27, 29, 2C. Right now though it will be too small, so we'll increase the border left width to be 4 pixels. So that the text isn't put together with the text field, I'll be giving it a padding of 16 pixels. Whenever we convert this text field to a text area, we don't want the text area to occupy the whole node as long as we type. So I'll make it have a max width of 600 pixels, to make the text go down without us needing to press enter. For our hover state, I only want to make the background color a little bit lighter, simply as a small piece of feedback, so I'll give it an Xcode of 25, 27, 29. For our focus, we'll be making it look more like a text field again, so we'll give it in the same background and border color as our text field class. Our text fields are now done, so let's update our buttons. We'll only be needing to update our Add Choice and Remove Choice button, but I'll name it DS Node button. In here, we'll update the background color to be 25, 27, 29. And the border color to be 1D, 1D, 1E. We'll also make its max height 25 pixels, so that it doesn't become too big. And give it a margin of 4 pixels. When hovering in our button, we'll want to make the background color a bit lighter for feedback, so I'll pass in 2B, 2D, 2F. When pressing on it or on the active pseudo class, we'll make it go darker and update its text color. So for our background color, I'll go with 21, 23, 25. And for our color, I'll go with FDD 057, which is a yellowish color. We should also update our main container background color, which will update the background color under our Add Choice button. So let's go ahead and type in DS Node, main container, and update its background color to be the same as our extension container background color. With that done, we only have a few remaining styles that aren't extremely necessary but will, in my opinion, make things look a bit better. The first style is to give a margin to the fold-out arrow and text, making them separate a bit more. We can do that by using the Unity Toggle Text class selector. Simply say margin left and give it a value of 2 pixels. Then we'll add a top and left margin to both our custom data container foldout and text field. Let's do that by typing in DS Node custom data container greater than foldout. And for the left margin, I'll give it negative 4 pixels, which will make it move to the left. And to the top margin, I'll give it 4 pixels. For our foldout text field, we can copy the above styles but also add greater than text field. And update the left margin to be negative 12 pixels, and the top margin to be 8 pixels. With that change, we finished all the styles we needed, and all that's left is to add those classes to our elements using the add to class list method. So let's go to our DS Node class and add our DS Node extension container to our extension container on the initialize method. When that's done, we add the DS Node main container class to our main container in the initialize method. Once that's done, we'll add the DS Node text field to every text field we have, so one will be for our dialog name, another will be for our dialog text, and then another will be for our choices. Then we'll be adding the dsNode filename textfield class to our dialog name textfield, followed by the dsNode textfield hidden class. When that's done, do the same for the choices textfield, but add the dsNode choice textfield, followed by the dsNode textfield hidden class as well. For our last textfield, add the dsNode quote textfield for the dialog text textfield. All that's left now are our buttons, so let's start by adding the dsNode button class to both our add choice and delete choice buttons in the multiple choice node script. Then we'll do the same, but for our custom data container in the draw method by giving it the dsNode custom data container class. If we save both files, we should now have our styles working. You might need to reopen your dialog graph window again if things aren't working properly. If an error shows up, make sure you haven't typed in anything wrong in the stylesheet file. It often tells you the line of where something was wrong. We now have our styles working, but we should be making their values into variables instead. We will separate the dark gray colors in 6 colors, in which we'll order from the darkest to the lightest, and which I'll name them ds colors, window, dark gray, and the number from 1 up to 6. I'll be leaving the X codes in the correct order in the screen, but feel free to type along. We'll also make one for our yellowish color. Let's now swap our color values into their corresponding variables in our dsNode styles USS file. You can say search for the Xcode that you want and swap it with the var and the correct variable. Once that's done, we'll be creating our metrics variables. I'll order it from the smallest number to highest number, and we'll write negative before the amount for the negative values. Feel free to type in along as well. All that's left now is to swap these values into their correct variables using the same technique. When we are done, we can simply save, and going back to Unity should leave us with the same result. Our custom data container styles are missing here, and that's simply because in our USS file I've typed in custom data containers. So remove the last letter and it should be fine.